I'm Katie, and this is episode 73 of Ornamentations. Wow, that's a lot of floss tubes, or it seems like a lot of floss tubes to me. But I think we have so much good stuff today because I have 3 FFOs to share with you. I have the registration of the Elizabethan Valentine. It's finally back. I know a lot of you have been very, very patiently waiting for it. And then that was the thread winder. Anyone want to keep a running count on how many times I dropped this during this episode? It's probably going to be a lot. I also have some spectacular whip progress on Eliza Townsend. It looks amazing, and I can't wait to share that with you. And then giveaway winners at the end of the episode. So there's a lot to talk about today. I'm really excited to share it with you. So get ready with your stitching, and we'll start with registration for the Elizabethan Valentine, which is now open. This is a 5-month online class from Katie Strachan Artisan Embroidery. The price is $275. That includes a full kit with all materials. We will do an unboxing of the kit at the very end of this floss tube, so stay tuned for that if you're interested. But basically everything you need except the frame in which to work your piece, because a lot of people will have that from other projects and can reuse it. It will cover frame options and how to use them as part of the course learning material. It doesn't presume that you know anything going in. So if you are a beginner, if you're totally new to embroidery, that's fine. We will cover everything that you need to know, from starting and stopping thread to how to lace your fabric in a frame to even the smallest details of the finishing of this beautiful piece, which is inspired by 17th century casket toys. It does open to reveal a luscious pink silk interior and a little toy within a toy, which is the gorgeous mother of pearl thread winder, and these are provided by the incomparable Jackie Duplessis. And then one of the other great features of the kit is that it includes 8 full spools of filament silk thread in an authentic 17th century palette. As I said, I was very inspired by 17th century casket toys and stuck to a period consistent palette in designing the Elizabethan Valentine. The course is entirely work at your own pace. So I provide lessons every month. There is no requirement to keep up with the work that's been posted. Just download the lesson and then get to it when you have time for it, when you feel ready to do for it. I don't impose any requirements on you. That's your material that will be there for you whenever you're ready to stitch your project. So 5-month course, which I think I said it will begin September 1st, 2024, and then class kits will ship out as soon as you are fully paid. You can pay in full or in 2-month installments set up through PayPal. All of that information is on my website, and then you can contact me through the contact form on my website if you have any other additional questions about the class. Full course description is also on my website, and I will link to that in the description. And then, as I mentioned, we will have a full kit unboxing at the end of this floss tube. So that's the Elizabethan Valentine, which is now open for registration. It really is a spectacular little object because the camera doesn't do the silver justice. It just dazzles, that glorious sparkling silver background. Gorgeous. I love it. Well, you know I love it because I've done 2 classes featuring it, the pin pillow and the Elizabethan Valentine. So with that, let's get on to my FFOs because I have got finishes. So first, we are going to return to Snow Magical by Brenda Gervais. We saw this as a stitched finish, but not an FFO on the last episode. And I did do the finishing and I couldn't resist. I added even more sparkles to this because why hold back with Christmas, right? So I used my own embellished ornament hanger. There's a tutorial on this. It's under my tutorials playlist. So these are just pendants that have been stitched into the metallic braid hanger. I did clear rounds. I thought they kind of echoed the snowballs on the design. I mean, it's a little too much frosting on the cake, but I love frosting and I love cake and I love sparkles and Christmas. So I went for it and I'm cool with that. So lots and lots of sparkles. Back is just a silk satin coordinating from Stash, and that is Snow Magical. Which seriously, that gets so washed out with all the light in here, but it really is quite a vibrant teal. It's a beautiful piece. I will film my Christmas episodes this year in front of my tree again, and maybe we'll get a better look at how much this really pops in a less saturated lighting situation. So that's Snow Magical. I'll link to the tutorial for this if you haven't seen it. Really fun. And then the full conversion was published in the last episode. So the next time we'll see this will be on my Christmas tree during the holidays, because this will be going away with my ornaments. It's done. I'm thrilled. And then I was on a roll. I actually have another ornament finish. This is my June 12 by 12 finish. So as you've heard, I'm trying and mostly succeeding to make one ornament every month to have 12 new ones when Christmas comes around. And this is a little wool felt applique ornament of Santa. It's a free pattern from What a Curly Life, and I will link that in the description. Mine has a little less contrast, and I think it's a little less successful than the model because I was just working from Stash with what I had. Her Santa face has a little more pop. I did make up for that by adding plenty of sequins, the same ones I used for Snow Magical, to the base of his beard. So mine does have sparkle, and I will say that, you know, does definitely add some pop. It's maybe not the star of my Christmas decorations, but who doesn't love a little extra sparkly fun? So if you've been looking for a way to get started with some Christmas wool appliques, she had, I think, 24 or 25 free Christmas wool felt applique patterns, and I'll link all of that in the description. I'm also going to do the Christmas mouse from her. So cute, really fast, very fun, and as I said, I just used felt, thread, sequins, beads from Stash, and that was just a really quick, simple finish. So got my June, got my May, April, 2 months, so 11 by 12, close enough. And then I have one more FFO, which I can't really show you, but I do want to talk about because I'm a tease. So I finished and mounted this is the back. This is the back. This is not the glass. This piece is going to be the next new embroidery class from Katie Strachan Artists in Embroidery. It has been in timeout longer than I want to think about. I made substantial revisions to this piece quite some time ago, and then I had to think for quite a while about what the finishing touches were that would really put this over the line, because I was sitting there looking at it going, yeah, that's close, but that's not it. That's not there. I always want my classes to be the best possible versions of themselves. So it's been sitting there unloved forever, and then I finally just needed the slate frame back. So I ripped off the Band-Aid and I did it. It's over the finish line. It was actually kind of embarrassing once I finally pulled it out and set my mind to it, how little there was left remaining on this little fun piece. This is going to be our first foray into needle lace and dimensional embroidery. So tiny teaser, I will be revealing the project later this year, and I hope to offer this class in early 2025. The next class from Katie Strachan Artists in Embroidery will be the Britomart sampler. I don't actually have an ETA on that yet. And then we will have this mystery piece, which, yeah, it doesn't look that exciting from the back. Well, actually, I haven't even finished the back yet. This is blank canvas for what will eventually go here, but it's going to be cool. It's going to be really cool. Is that the most underwhelming of a faux reveal or what? I know, it's terrible, but I am going to make it up to you because now we're on to whips. And the only whip I've been working on, other things are finishes, is Cross Stitch Antiques, Oh Sweet Humility, Eliza Townsend's work. So we saw this last time and I did have a lot then, but I have even more now. Let me show you. Look at that. Is that fabulous or what? Also, how much dang grass is that? So much. I'm so proud. So I'm just filling in between the shepherd and shepherdess, going down to that corner. But I would say that's pretty close to 50% of dang grass on this piece. It's also the full border structure. It is not the full border because I don't have all the carnations that go in those downward sections in between our pink top flowers. I have to make a decision there. So I didn't work those as I was working the border, partly because I just wanted to get the structure in, not stitch the complete border. But I have to think about this because the carnations shown here, they're squatty and rectangular. I'd kind of like to round them out a little more. I've been playing with that with the layout to figure out how to have like enough physical room to do this. I've solved that problem. So I need to test just a little bit of an adjustment to the shape since I have room to make that change. The other thing is that I don't want the border to be too visually overwhelming. So we've discussed the fugitive color, that would be all that gray you're seeing in Eliza Townsend before. And as you can see, obviously, I've restored a lot of color to that border, but I don't want it to be overwhelming. So I'm thinking no more red goes in the carnations. Instead, this pink is the brightest color. And we actually have more lighter pinks so that you have color, but it doesn't become overwhelming because, you know, what I was really drawn to with Eliza Townsend was this beautiful, beautiful antique. And although I did want to restore some of the color, I don't want it to be too much because you do have very strong color here in the top floral elements. And I don't want it to be overwhelming. The original is beautifully balanced, and that's something that I want to keep, which is also why I'm keeping all the gray in the ground. The peacock's not going to go back to blue. The shepherd and shepherdess are in gray because that helps provide a counterweight to all the color that I've put back in the border. So one other thing that I wanted to mention about this is some of the changes that I've been making. I've been doing layout work primarily around the verse. So Eliza Townsend's chosen verse is really, you can see, too large for the physical space that she has for it. And I did also just want to change the verse to reflect my taste a little better. Also just to give me, you know, more freedom to reorganize some of these elements and better allot space on here. So I thought a lot about how a quote would actually go into the marked area, and that's something that I considered when I picked my new quote. It wasn't actually my first choice on substance, but it really nicely fits into a small area. So that was how I ended up where I did. It's from Andrew Marvell's poem, The Garden. And that poem was also the inspiration behind my green casket. If you're not familiar with it, I'll link the episode in which it appeared. And I like the idea of different pieces being tied together by common references and inspiration. So in addition to the Marvell poem, this piece also has a really strong red, pink, green color scheme, which is shared by the green casket. So I like the idea of kind of tying these together through my own taste and inspiration. Marvell was a 17th century English metaphysical poet, so the quote is earlier than the 1835 date of the sampler. I did do that deliberately, one, because the early modern period is just kind of my home, but also because the house here is pretty clearly Elizabethan in structure. It's earlier than the date of the sampler, so I called back to the earlier period suggested by the house and not the date of sampler. Is that more than you wanted to know about my quote choice? It probably is. Sorry about that. Anyways, the quote itself. My soul into the boughs does glide. There like a bird it sits and sings, then whets and combs its silver wings. So that to me nods to the nature of Eliza Townsend's verse, but it also brings something of myself and my taste into this piece. And it also gives me more physical space to play with, which was very important to me. However, my intent isn't to write Eliza Townsend out of the story, because the base of this piece is still very much her sampler as charted by Kathleen. I'm just changing the verse, making some color choices and moving a few things around the edges. It's still very much Eliza Townsend's work. So while it's going to have my name, date, choice of verse, and basically my color changes, it's going to be framed, and at that point I'm going to put all the information about Eliza on the back so that her story is combined with my own. And I think that's fitting because ultimately this piece is mostly Eliza Townsend, but there's a lot of me in here too, or at least there will be by the time that I'm done. And honestly, I think that's the story really of everything that we stitched, whether or not we consciously make changes. A really great example here of being able to see my hand is the errors which are present. So Eliza Townsend's border is actually perfectly regular. I counted very carefully at every repeat on the chart just to make sure, and yeah, her border was perfect. My own has 6 derivations. One of those right here was an unintentional mistake. The other 5 are intentional compensations for all of the errors I've made in stitching the sampler so far. So you can see me through my errors if nothing else. I mean, also in the color changes and the choice of materials, the choice of verse. I am going to put my own name on this, but my screw ups are part of my story too. I think that's part of the story of any stitcher, really. I mean, how many of us stitch perfectly? I certainly don't. So that's Eliza Townsend. I do hope to have more to show you for the next episode. I definitely want to start filling in up here to this side of the house, and so that would be the stone building and the flowering vine above it. Maybe look at the border a little bit and then hopefully start moving over here. I do really want to focus on dang grass because, as we've all heard, block stitching isn't really my jam. But oh, isn't that beautiful? That is just gorgeous. So this is 45 count legacy linen jersey cream, and I am using an original silk conversion of Swasserfine, which is listed in the description but is currently incomplete. I'm not sure yet how many colors I'm going to add to this, but definitely some. And then one of the other things I wanted to mention was a new Flosstube that I really enjoyed. The channel is called Comfort Stitching, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen this already because really, what a great title. But one of the things that really resonated with me and why I wanted to mention it here was her introduction, and especially the part where she talked about how her first piece, Consider the Lilies, which is definitely a wonderful big sampler, was something that she might have been too intimidated by if she had really known more about it, but she just went ahead. I actually saw her Consider the Lilies at Sampler Symposium. It was the talk of show and share, and it was beautiful. She personalized it, she made a lot of changes, all of which she discusses in her Flosstube and shows you Consider the Lily. So definitely go and watch it. But one of the reasons that it resonated with me so much is that that's very much my own story too. So those of you who are longtime viewers will know that I jumped right into casket stitching as a baby stitcher, and honestly wouldn't have done the things that I did if I had known anything about it. I would have been too scared. So it's a great reminder to be brave, because we can always do more than we think that we're capable of. And I also just really enjoyed her Flosstube, and her stitching is lovely. So comfort stitching, go and check it out. Really, what a title, because is comfort what so much of us find in our stitching, or what? And that actually leads me to my last topic today, which were the wonderful, wonderful responses to the question I posed last time. I'd like to thank you all for, just having so many thought-provoking, inspiring, and thoughtful responses to the question I posed. I was so glad to see that you liked it, that you engaged with the question. I wasn't sure if it would be of interest to anyone at all, but you had so much to say, and it was really, really fascinating to read all your responses. So thank you for that. And I am going to just read a few out here, just because I think it's an interesting topic. Just to recap, for those of you who might not have seen the last episode, this was inspired by the current Met exhibition, and the question that I asked was, if you could determine the future of your stitching, so this would be after your lifetime, what would you wish for it if you could give it anything? So there were a lot of references to joy, both the joy that our stitching has brought us and the hope that others will see that joy in it, whether it's family members or people presently unknown to us who admire our stitching in the future, come to possess it and find that joy that we ourselves feel. A lot of you also felt that textiles, correctly, were living things that should not be locked away, but used, appreciated, and continue to have something that I might call life, even if it damages their condition or shortens their lifespan. This was one of my favorites that I'd like to read to you. My stitching tends to be on clothing and other utility objects that get worn by myself, my kids, gifted, and used for historical reenactment. I like that they're used. I've seen some of my pieces that have been used for 20 years until the garment was worn out. Then the embroidery was cut off and reused on another garment, just as it would have been historically. That's exactly the life I want for them. Used, loved, reused, repaired, eventually unrecognizable. Gone except in shreds, scraps, and memory. Oh my gosh, is that beautifully put, or what? But it's also very true that that's the historic story of textiles, repurposing, reusing, and cutting up, and finding old ways to reuse old embroideries is the history of embroidery. As much as I cringe and want to die 1,000 deaths at the idea of that happening to something like AKGIT, oh God, some of the layered textiles that resulted in that through history are actually really fascinating works of art in their own right. So one great example of this, and unfortunately this book is out of print, is the embroideries at Hardwick Hall by Santina Levy. So this is a great book that I really enjoy. And if you're unfamiliar with Hardwick Hall, it's a collection of Elizabethan era textiles that have largely survived intact, although not entirely in their original forms. And it was the creation of Bess of Hardwick, an Elizabethan noblewoman who was one of the richest women in England at the time and a great lover of textiles. She restored and expanded her family home, essentially as a monument to herself. And she filled it with really expensive textiles and embroideries, some of which were her own work, many of which were professional pieces, and some of which were essentially assembled from all kinds of different bits. So this is a segment of embroideries on the goddesses, and some of the embroidery is original, some of it is sourced from professional work, And then some of the pieces that went into her various hangings were repurposed ecclesiastical textiles. So Elizabethan era, that would be after the Protestant Reformation, when a lot of Catholic vestments were seized and sold off and cut up for parts, which would have been very, very painful to a lot of people, but it meant that a lot of richly worked pieces were available for song and were reused by people like Bess of Hardwick. And then part of the story of the Textiles of Hardwick Hall doesn't end with the Elizabethan era. A lot of Bess's creations, you know, they were displayed, they were exposed to light, to dust, and so her descendants ended up cutting some of them down to hide damaged pieces, framing things that had been hangings, moving them from their original purpose, from their original place, reusing, repurposing, recycling, and reimagining. So, spot on comment, totally historically accurate, as was very correctly pointed out. However, another really frequent thread was how much of ourselves is in our stitching. Essentially, the wish for our stitching to serve as a way for others to remember us, and how meaningful our stitching was to all of us. And I think that kind of calls back to, you know, what I'm doing with Eliza Townsend, saying that I am in this piece because I am, and you all are in everything that you've stitched too, even if you follow the chart down to the tiniest detail, because stitching is such a personal process. We invest so much of our time, our emotion, our joy, our love, ourselves into our stitching, and that, it turns out, is how so many of us hope to be remembered. It was a really common thread running through the comments. You know, making is such a personal process. So another comment, two comments that I'd like to read. If it winds up in a thrift shop, I want it to go to someone who enjoys it for its beauty, because it speaks to that innermost part of someone's being and makes them happy. Someone who can respect it for what it is. And then another one that's really interesting. I'm of the belief that items hold on to something of the original owner. Think haunted items. I hope my stitched pieces will transfer some of the joy that I've put into them to their new owner. So, Remember Us by the Works of Our Needle was on the Cabinet of Curiosities kits from Thistle Threads. I remember opening the box and seeing that over a decade later, because the sentiment really spoke to me. And if there was a single common thread running through the comments in the last episode, and if you're interested in any of this, please do go back and read them. They were really, really interesting. It was that Remember Us by the Works of Our Needle. And you know, we can't know how our work is truly perceived by others, because a lot of you mentioned worries that children, especially sons or grandsons, wouldn't necessarily attach as much meaning to your pieces as you hoped. And you know, the thing is, people can really surprise you. I never thought my brother was that interested in my stitching, but it turns out that he is. I made a Christmas tree for him. Well, I bought the tree, but I made the ornaments and the tree skirt for him as a gift several years ago. I add to it every Christmas with new ornaments. After he mentioned that he'd kind of like to have a tree himself, but he didn't have any ornaments. And, you know, much to my surprise, that's one of his cherished possessions. So every year when I give him an ornament, the first thing he does is take a photograph and send it to his friends because he thinks it's cool. Now, to be fair, those are ornaments that are explicitly geared towards his taste. I don't know that he'd feel the same about the pink flowers of Eliza Townsend, for example, but he did really appreciate AKGIT. I worked on it at a lot of our Sunday family lunches, and he thought it was very cool. But I'd also note that this kind of applies to me too. in a way. So my maternal grandmother, and I've shown you this before, but it really is worth showing again, stitched a kit copy of the Chase sampler from the collection of Colonial Williamsburg. These were the kits that were produced back in the 70s. You know, it's actually the only embroidery or cross stitch any of us can remember her doing. She was a garment sewer, not a stitcher, although gosh, that didn't hold her back. She did do beautiful work on this. And so after she died, this was the only piece that I asked for from her home as something to remember her by. I thought it was beautiful. I remembered having seen it hanging on her wall for years, and this was what I chose as my memento of my grandmother. And a lot of you may be listening to this going, yeah, that's pretty obvious. However, at the time that she died and I asked for this piece in remembrance, I actually hadn't started stitching myself. I had sewed garments, I did so from childhood, but I had never at that point yet picked up a needle and cross-stitched or embroidered anything at that point myself. So in that sense, I guess it was kind of meant to be. I don't know if it steered me to embroidery or I was already drawn to embroidery and I just didn't know it yet. But you never know, your piece could be the thing that leads someone to try it for themselves. So I wouldn't sell yourselves short, because really we don't know the impact we'll have on anyone. And then the last point I wanted to bring up, I know I've been going on forever, I am sorry. So I thought I had to share this because it's brilliant. So one commenter is making her own informal book of her stitching, kind of echoing the recently published Objects Dayfully. And so she's putting everything together in her own record, and I think that's just a great idea for any stitcher. On a practical record level, that means there's a record of what you've left behind, but you can also record what those pieces mean to you, what you were doing in your life when you made them, the emotion they hold for you, the joy that you want to pass on. You have so many of you referenced in your comments, all the memories that you'd like that piece to hold. So Susan Stanley has talked about this a lot in making her quilt labels, that they're not just dry who, what, where, when, but comprehensive, what was going on in her life and what the piece meant to her. You can do that with your stitching, as one commenter is already doing, and I think that's a really beautiful book of memories to leave behind too, maybe even a written key to the objects themselves. So that's the conversation on Sleeping Beauties, which I hope you enjoyed. You guys just had so many wonderful things to say that I wanted to share them with you. And so I hope that wasn't too boring. But let's finish today with giveaways. So the winner of the Sleeping Beauty palette that I offered as my inducement to answer my question is Modelbuch Muse. Sorry, I don't speak German. And then I also have an update on 2 previous giveaways. So 2 winners have previously been announced for the scroll frame that I was using with the Britomart sampler. It's already wrapped up for shipping, so I can't show it to you, but it's a Kay's Creation scroll frame that would be perfect for, you know, any large project. Neither of those winners ever came forward, so we're going to have a new draw for it today rather than just keep picking from an old video. The keyword for that is frame, and again, that is a scroll frame set with 2 sets of scroll rods and then sidebars and extra knobs from Kay's Creation. Keyword frame to enter. The winner of the box announced last time also hasn't contacted me, so Kay Hayes 9591, you have until June 17th to email me with your mailing address, or I'll draw a new winner for the next episode. So that brings us to the end of this episode, which I hope you enjoyed. For next time, we're going to have a Christmas in July preview. I have to select an ornament for my July 12 by 12. We'll also be looking at the coming Christmas in July kits. We'll have some work progress, see how far I get on Eliza Townsend, and I'm also thinking of some new starts. I'd really like to start Flag Thief, which I would like to be the summer 2025 kit. Oh, is that great or what? And actually way more doable than it looks. I thought it'd be huge when I first saw the picture, but the stitch count is only 123 by 109. So really doable, really fun. So I might start on this for next time. I'd certainly like to. So stay tuned for the kit unboxing of the Elizabethan Valentine, which is now open for registration. If you are not interested in the kit unboxing, I will see you again in 2 weeks. And until then, happy stitching. Let's take a look inside the class kit for the Elizabethan Valentine, which will enable you to make this fabulous, sparkling, tiny treasure, which can stand alone or be a toy for your very own casket, perhaps the first piece of your own casket journey. And let's look inside. So you have a couple of cards, one of which is a reminder to download all your lesson material. Good stuff is in here, and we'll start with your fabrics, which come with a note not to iron them. They are sublimation printed. That means the design's already been transferred onto them, but it is a heat activated process, so it is theoretically possible to lift that transfer with the application of heat. I haven't managed to do that, but don't try it. You don't want to find out that way. We also have the laser cut forms that are put together to make the heart itself with its little cavity that holds the mother of pearl thread winder that goes inside, and then some of the finishing things that you'll need. So the heart is padded out with a nice thick spongy felt, which helps give it this rounded shape from the harder edged form. And then the beautiful pink and white silk lacet braid that's used for the ties on the heart. A single cut of Soie 103. This is used for the French knots. It's such a limited application that I didn't want to add the cost of a full spool here. Everything else used, you're given full spools. That's something I very strongly believe in. Also, for finishing, you have your silver scallop trim. That is what edges your heart. It really neatly finishes off the design line. There's a spool of Soie Surfane. This is used in all of your finishing. And then there's a small cut of silver bright check. That's used for the little finial at the bottom of the heart. There's also a full spool of silver 9 DRM tambour thread. That may be new to many of you, but it's a flexible, real silver metal thread. If you've never worked with the real stuff before, it is legitimately much easier to use than synthetics, not to mention the spectacular results that you get. You also have all of your needles that you'll need to work this project, and they're clearly labeled as well. And then we have your glorious, glorious silks. These are 8 colors of Soie de Paris, so these are all the colors used in the project. There is one that's on a larger spool. This is the same Paris as everything else. It was just from a different spooling. So beautiful, beautiful palette, as we can see, dominated by greens and red pinks that are gloriously set off by that silver background. And then the final thing in your kit is a hard copy template. The only thing you need it for is your felt padding, but I've also given you the fabric designs as well, just in case anything does happen to your design transfer. You've got everything that you need in the event of the worst case scenario, or if you'd like to darken your design lines through tracing. So that's the Elizabethan Valentine kit. If you do have any questions about this or the class, please feel free to contact me using the form on my website, which I'll link in the description. I hope to have you in class.